Hey YouTube, back with another Draw With Me video. So, you'll probably recognize this sketch. This was actually from the last Draw With Me episode where I was working on these guys. Oh, I'll just get them in there. And this is just something I've been chipping away at in my own time. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to record the entire process of the creation of this drawing because I've been pretty busy with this mural that I'm working on, and there's a couple other of projects that I've taken on as well. So it's been a pretty hectic time, honestly, but a very creative time, so that's always good. But yeah, this was kind of the finished sketch. This horse looks a little bit funky, you know, like the anatomy doesn't look correct. I didn't really draw the eye in properly. But that's because I didn't really do a proper line drawing for it. Same with this one. I was actually going to kind of leave them in this stage where it was just kind of scribbly, and then I was only going to draw just the riders in detail, but I ended up kind of adding some shadows on the horses as well. So they look a little bit funny, but I still think it's a cool drawing. I'm still happy with it. It's a cool concept, and that's all it needs to be. That's all the sketch needs to be. So I'm going to continue with that concept, but this time I've got another piece of paper here. And I think the horse, this one looks a bit better than in the other drawing. And I'm just kind of going over the line work, so I'm just inking it in today. And this is actually going to be an acrylic painting. So this is going to be the value sketch for the painting that I'm working on. And I want to do a few sketches of these guys because they are in the foreground of the painting and they will be the most detailed. So that's why I've drawn them a couple of times. Now, I'm just kind of inking in my lines. I've already finished this guy, so I'm doing the other guy now. And, the reason I'm doing that is because it just gives me a chance to refine the line work. And it's not a carbon copy of the last sketch either. There are a few differences because that's just how I work. I don't really like tracing or anything like that. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with tracing, especially if you're working under time constraints, but this piece is more of a personal piece right now, so I don't really have to trace over anything. I can just kind of redraw it and redesign it, changing a few things here and there. But going over the pencil work will allow me to just kind of refine some of this line work, just refine some of the shapes, just give me like a second chance to sort of think about what it is that I'm actually trying to do. So, anytime that I'm doing these kinds of drawings, I'm trying my best to not be a slave to the initial sketch. Like, I'm always trying to just kind of tweak the shapes here and there. But it's always a bit easier when you've got the pencil sketch in there. But yeah, I like inking in because the ink kind of gives the drawing just like another quality. And there's just something about ink that really, I don't know, it just kind of really makes the drawing turn out better for some reason. Maybe it's because we're putting a bit more effort because of how permanent ink is. So maybe that's the reason they tend to look a bit better once they're inked in. But yeah, there's just something about using ink where the drawing looks so much better for it. And I'm really just trying to focus on silhouette right now. Just looking for opportunities to maybe tweak some of those angles. Just push the silhouettes of those shapes a little more, you know. And it's not a terribly quick process, you know. Like, I'm not really rushing through it. I'm just kind of drawing very slowly, to be honest. Just taking my time. But it's funny because when you take your time, before you know it, the drawing is kind of done. It kind of sneaks up on you. You know, it feels like it's going to take forever. But in reality, it doesn't really take long at all. Especially when you kind of just go in with the intention of making each line the final line. So every time this pen touches the paper, I'm kind of thinking, okay, once this line is in there, that's it. I'm not going to be able to change it. So I'm also kind of I guess being a lot more deliberate with my lines this time around. So normally I don't ink the drawing in at all. Usually I just skip this stage and go straight into the acrylic painting. But I figured that this time around, I would go in with the pen and just see if I can just maybe change some things that I don't like about the drawing, or maybe not even change, but just kind of enhance the things that I do like about it. So still continuing with the Polish Hussar theme, which is what I've been doing for the mural. And there's a bit of a funny story about that mural. So originally, the mural was intended to be like a great cavalry charge of these guys. I think it was the Siege of Vienna, which was the event where I'm going to mispronounce his name, but I think it was Jan Sobieski. He led a great cavalry charge of 3,000 Polish hussars against the Ottomans. And this would have been in the 1600s sometime. So that was kind of the history. And so anyway, there's a bit of historical background there, but yeah, the mural that I'm working on, it was meant to actually be something a bit more like this, just like a big cavalry charge. But, you know, because it was a mural for like a public space, obviously there were a few other opinions that we had to consider. And there was also budget and time constraints and things like that. So as much as I loved the idea of the cavalry charge, it wasn't quite, I suppose, realistic with what we could do. So we had to kind of compromise on that idea a little, which is a bit of a shame. But, I still like the idea so much that I kind of just decided, well, I'm going to maybe do a few sketches of that scene anyway, just to see if I can get any cool concepts out of it, you know. So that's kind of how it all came about. So yeah, I decided to just kind of stick with that idea, and so that's why I've been drawing these guys, because I think the concept is so cool, and the history behind that story is very cool as well. So you know, it would be a shame to abandon it. I don't want to go into the face too much because you know, I'm gonna obviously change a lot of that when I get into the painting stage. Obviously, a lot of that's gonna change, so I'm not gonna waste too much time here. Really, the whole point of this stage is to just kind of clarify some things that might not be very obvious in the pencil sketch. So that's kind of why I'm just going in here a second time. It also gives me an opportunity to change some things that I don't like. So I'm just kind of like adding maybe like a fur coat that comes across the side of his body over here, which isn't very obvious right now. I mean, I suppose I could put some pen strokes in there to make that look a bit more like fur. But really, in order to make that work, I'm just gonna have to paint that in. So, you know, anything that requires detail or, you know, a bit of effort, I suppose, in making it look believable, I would probably just leave that until I get the acrylic paint on. I don't think there's any point trying to refine things too much in this stage, because it's all going to get painted over anyway. This stage really is just to, again, just to clarify certain elements of the image which perhaps I don't like very much. Or perhaps, you know, it was left a little too vague in the pencil stage. So now I'm kind of just going in and, you know, again, just kind of adding a little more detail just for a bit of extra guidance. But yeah, I'm not trying to be too detailed in this stage, especially with this guy in the background. Like, this guy's in the foreground, so he's obviously going to be the most detailed. This dude is well in the background right now, so not much point putting too much detail on him. He's kind of meant to be sort of, I'm just going to kind of shove him out of the limelight a little bit. His face looks a bit funky. Doesn't look as good as in the this sketch here. I think this one looks way better. He looks like a maniac in this one. I love it. But you know, as long as I convey the idea, then that's fine. I can always change it a bit later on when I get the paint on there. What else? Okay, so let's get the horse kind of sketched in. I'm hoping these horses turn out a little better. I'm trying to put a bit more effort into them this time. Horses are always tricky. There's a lot of shapes in there, and you know, fur textures, and you know, like the hair from the mane and things like that. Like, horses can be very tricky if you're not careful with what you're doing. But again, you know, it's all It's all design. And I'm not trying to go into too much detail here. I'm actually just putting in kind of very abstract looking lines, if I'm being honest. I'm not trying to bog myself down with too much detail. I'm not trying to think too hard about the forms. I'm just getting the pen in there. And again, if I mess anything up in this stage, it's not a problem. Because again, I can always just change it when the time comes to draw it in. So, not a problem really. I think this stage, more than anything else, it's just to kind of make the shapes a little more interesting to look at. I think that's one element of it. I also think it's an opportunity to refine the perspective on some of these forms a little bit. That's certainly another element. So really all I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to make the line work look a little more interesting to look at. That's probably the best way of thinking of it. I'm not going for hyperrealism here. I'm just really just trying to style it in a way that it looks cool. And I'm leaving a lot of broken lines as well. So I can get a little bit of ambiguity in there. I don't want to describe things in too much detail. It's really just a series of well-placed lines. That's kind of all I'm doing. Okay. Yeah, it's funny, if you look at the sketches by like the old masters, like Rembrandt, for example, you know, a lot of their sketches were very, were kind of left very vague. They were done sort of haphazardly a lot of the time. I'm all for a good rendered drawing, absolutely. But you know, again, if I'm going to work on a painting, then I'm going to leave the drawing stage a little more vague and a little less detailed than I normally would. Because the detail can kind of distract. And if you work with a vague drawing, then if anything, that's kind of better because it just gives you multiple opportunities to change things about the image if you want to. You know, you don't have to commit to the image too much. You can go ahead and change certain things about it. So and anything that's super difficult to draw, like I'm trying to draw like these sort of tassels that are coming off from the horse, like the saddle, or it's like this coat that the horse is wearing, for example. Again, I'm not trying to draw them in any great detail. I'm really just putting in some lines that look kind of stylish, and you know, you, the viewer, might not be able to tell what that is, but as long as I can look at it and know what it is, then that's fine. That's all that it needs to be. So yeah, just kind of keeping the sketch very loose, very not perfect. And I'm just trying not to spend all day on it. Like I'm trying to kind of draw the line work in fairly quickly. Because again, once I start painting this thing in, a lot of it's going to change anyway. So I think it's kind of futile just trying to do a perfect drawing when you're only going to change it anyway. And I just find there's this weird thing that happens where it's like the more detailed your drawing is, the worse the painting gets, almost. I guess it really depends on your painting style, but you know, when I paint, I really like to use very loose brush strokes, very textured brush strokes, you know. I don't mind refining the brush stroke and doing like those really tight rendered strokes as well. But because I like to paint somewhat painterly with a bit of detail here and there, I think it's best really if I just leave the sketch a little bit looser, because I just find that there's so many more opportunities in a loose sketch than with a tight one. And again, this is still a sketch. This is all conceptual. This isn't the final painting. This is just an acrylic sketch. So I'm not really aiming for perfection anyway. I think that's a little silly. I can aim for perfection once I get the conceptual things figured out. Once the concept is more or less secure, then I can start doing more refined drawings. But, you know, right now, because everything is still being worked out, I don't really see the point in being a perfectionist about these things. I may as well just kind of have a bit more fun and play around a little more. That makes much more sense to me. But yeah, I need to do a few more anatomy studies, especially for the horses. I'm kind of just making it up a little bit right now. But again, all that anatomy can be refined in the painting stage. So once I throw some acrylic paint on this thing, I can maybe, you know, have a look at some photos of horses, or like some horse anatomy diagrams, things like that. I think the most important thing right now is to just kind of get it on the page and to just have something that is interesting to look at and Has very nice sort of exciting line work. You know, it might not look realistic, but at least if I can make it more interesting to look at least, then that's something. And then just some hatching strokes here just to kind of indicate the dark areas of the painting, what's going to be in light, what's likely to be in shadow. I don't think there's any reason to overthink these things just yet. He does have a lance that's meant to sort of come out here. I think maybe like his hand is here, but I'll just kind of paint it in later, I think, because I don't quite know where I want to place that just yet. So yeah, the paint will give me another opportunity to refine things, change things around. If there's anything I don't like, it will be changed. And I don't think I'm going to have to draw too much of this anatomical detail for this horse anyway, because it is in the background. I can make it a bit flatter. I think a lot of it's going to be sort of like in darkness anyway, so I'm probably not going to have to, hopefully, think too hard about it, but we'll see. You can also do quite a lot with just a few hatching strokes. So you can definitely use them to your advantage. But yeah, this sketch is all about just going in quick, really. That's it. Not faffing around, just getting the job done. Now, if you are perhaps a little new to drawing, then maybe you would want to spend a bit more time on the drawing phase before starting the painting, just to kind of make sure that I guess you're on the right track and you like everything and everything looks correct to you. But you know, after a bit of experience, you can kind of just draw very sloppy, kind of like I am. You know, like I'm not really putting too much thought into this. I'm just really just searching for some shapes that I think look good. Or I'm searching for shapes that I think maybe they don't look good right now, but I can make them look good when I start painting in. But I remember when I first started painting, I always made sure that the drawing was quite detailed and it had all the information that I needed. So, you know, I think something like that probably helps out quite a lot. But yeah, like I said before, once you've got a bit of experience under your belt, I don't think you really have to think too hard about the drawing, because honestly, once you put the paint on the paper, it's all kind of going to change anyway. So, you know, I don't really waste too much time on this stage, even though the drawing stage is important. If it wasn't important, I wouldn't be doing it at all. But, you know, you can see how different, the ink just made. I can't speak today, bloody hell. You can see how much of a difference the pen made to the drawing. Like the drawing looks, it certainly doesn't look finished, but we're working with a bit more information now than what we did. And that's kind of what an artwork is. It's like each layer that you put onto the drawing is going to include even more information than what you had before. So I think just to finish this sketch off, I'm just going to darken this whole area here because I want this horse to be white. I've actually got a value sketch that I did of the painting too. So this will give you a bit more of an idea of what's going on here. So you can see this is the value sketch, that's the rider on the right, and this is the guy with the white horse in the foreground. So this gives you a much better idea of what it's kind of going to look like. And so because this horse is going to be white, then everything around it should probably be darkened, really. So I can actually just communicate that with some very simple hatching strokes. I don't have to think too hard about this. It's just going in. It's done. Maybe I could darken some of the drapery around here. So yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect sketch. It just has to communicate the idea. And as long as you can look at your own drawing and understand what's going on, as long as you understand the marks that you're making, then it's fine. You can draw as loose as you like. But you know, if you look at your own drawing and all you see is basically a mess, then you kind of need to keep going until you create something that you do like. That's basically my philosophy. So again, he's got like these textures in his helmet. It's kind of like this fluted sort of texture, but again, I've only just scribbled that in very quickly. I don't need to draw that in any kind of great detail right now. I can do that later. So really, when I'm doing the inking, the pencil and the ink is basically, you know, I'm not drawing in too much detail, I don't think. I think this is, you know, this guy is definitely a bit more detailed. But really what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to establish the composition, and I'm also just trying to make sure that the proportions look believable, you know. They don't have to be perfect, obviously, but they do have to look somewhat convincing, and we should be able to see somewhat of an image. Even if it looks quite unfinished, that's fine, that's not a problem, but you know, we do need some kind of concept here to work with, so that's how I see the drawing stage. It's really just the concept, it's the ideal. All right, so that's pretty good to work with, I think. So I think I can just go ahead and jump in to that right now with the acrylics. I think I'll just do that off camera, just to start with, because I don't really know if it's going to turn out any good or not. Sometimes I have very bad drawing days. But yeah, I'll get into that with the acrylic, and you know, if it looks like it's going well, then I'll record the rest.